She was just a quiet girl from a forgotten town. He was a single father with calloused hands and more heart than words. When a billionaire dared her to fix an engine, no one expected what came next. Not the town, not her father, not even the man who set the trap. But sometimes, it's the quietest voices that shake the world. If you believe in the power of kindness, quiet resilience, and stories that leave a mark long after they end, make sure to subscribe. You won't want to miss what unfolds next. Now let me tell you the story of Sierra Maddox and the engine that taught a town to listen. The sun hung low over the small town of Bearden, Arkansas, casting long amber shadows across the county fairgrounds. Folding chairs creaked beneath the weight of parents and passers-by, most of them squinting toward the makeshift stage, assembled for the town's annual Youth Mechanics Challenge. There were lemonade cups in children's hands, dust on boots, and the faint smell of motor oil mingling with funnel cake. And then there was the voice, smooth rehearsed and dripping with condescension. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced Mr. Ronald Callister, standing in the spotlight like he owned it, "I present to you a challenge worthy of champions." He was tall, silver-haired, and impeccably dressed, his pressed navy suit stark against the faded wood of the stage. Callister was known statewide as a tech magnate, a man who sold innovation by the pound and pride by the gallon. To many in Bearden, he was both a legend and a warning. Beside him sat a gleaming modern engine mounted on a metal rig like a trophy. It was polished to perfection, not a fingerprint on its casing. Even from the crowd you could tell this wasn't just a machine, it was a trap. "This engine," Callister declared, gesturing grandly, "has stumped 5 of my top engineers. Not one could make it turn. But today, I offer you bright minds of Bearden a chance to prove you're smarter than the pros. Fix it, and you win a full scholarship to State Tech and a paid internship at Callister Innovations." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Eyes sparkled. Young hopefuls leaned forward. But then Callister's tone shifted just slightly. "That said, let's not waste time. If you're unsure, unskilled, or inexperienced," his eyes scanned the audience, "this challenge might not be for you." The jab landed. Teenagers laughed nervously. A few stepped back. At the edge of the crowd, Sierra Maddox clenched her fists. 14, skinny and quiet Sierra wore a worn hoodie with sleeves too long and boots dusted in dry clay. Her hands bore the scars of wrench work, thin scrapes, and oil-stained cuticles. The daughter of Tom Maddox, the town's widowed mechanic Sierra, had spent more time around engines than most boys twice her age. But no one ever asked her to show it. They didn't see her. Until now. "I dare you," one voice called sharp and laughing. A boy in a polished mechanic shirt, part of the school's tech club. "Hey, grease girl, think you can fix that?" More laughter followed. Sierra stared at the engine, and then slowly she walked forward. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the whole fairground had fallen quiet just to watch her move. Some whispered, others pointed. Somewhere behind her, her father stood by his truck, arms crossed, unreadable. She didn't look at him. She didn't need to. Mr. Callister raised an eyebrow. "And you are?" "Sierra Maddox," she replied, voice steady. A ripple ran through the crowd. The Maddox name still carried weight. If only from whispered stories her mother had once worked as an electrical engineer before illness and tragedy took her from the family. Tom Maddox had raised Sierra alone since then, scraping by in a world that didn't leave much room for grief. Callister forced a smile. "Ah, a brave volunteer. Well, Ms. Maddox, the floor is yours." Sierra approached the engine. Her fingers brushed lightly over its surface, tracing the lines like a pianist studying new keys. She didn't reach for tools. Not yet. The engine was too clean. No scratches near the mounting bolts. No heat stains near the exhaust. No wear on the harness. It hadn't been tested. It had been set up. Sierra crouched, lifted a small magnetic panel along the side. Beneath it, nestled like a secret, was a circuit board too sophisticated for a basic engine. An LED blinked rhythmically. Tick, 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 pause. She frowned. It was mimicking a fault, simulating failure. She rose and turned to Callister. "Do you have a toolkit?" A nearby staffer handed her a metal case. She opened it carefully, selecting only 3 tools. Then, with practiced precision, she disconnected the board's bypass route, rerouted a wire cluster, and tightened a connection near the throttle sensor. Each move, quiet, deliberate. Minutes passed. Then Sierra stepped back. "Try it now," she said. Callister smirked, clearly expecting nothing. He flipped the ignition. The engine sputtered, coughed, then roared to life. And suddenly, the fairground was silent. Not a cheer. Not a word. Only the clean, smooth hum of the impossible engine, purring in the evening air. Mr. Callister stared, his mouth slightly open. Someone dropped a clipboard. Sierra said nothing. She didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She simply walked off the stage. As she passed her father, Tom gave a quiet nod just once. She didn't need applause. She'd brought an engine to life. And in doing so, she'd made the whole town hear her voice without saying a word. The morning after the Fairbearden was quieter than usual. The kind of quiet that settles over a town when something unexpected has happened. Something people aren't sure how to talk about yet. Sierra Maddox walked through it with her head-down backpack slung over one shoulder, grease still under her fingernails from the night before. She didn't need to hear what people were saying. Their silence was louder. At the corner of Maple and 3rd, old men paused their chess game outside the barber shop to watch her pass. Mrs. Langley, the church secretary, gave a polite nod, but didn't smile. And at the gas station, 2 boys from school suddenly found their shoes fascinating when she walked in to pay for a bottle of water. "Nice work yesterday," one mumbled without meeting her eyes. Sierra nodded, but said nothing. She had learned early on that words often made things worse. Tom's garage sat just past the old train depot, a weathered building with dented siding, mismatched panels, and a hand-painted sign that read, "Maddox Auto." It was barely hanging on like most things Tom owned, but everything inside worked better than it looked. She found him under a lifted truck boots, poking out, humming faintly to an old country tune playing on the radio. "You're late," he said, without looking. "You didn't give me a time. I figured you'd be here before the rumors caught up." She dropped her backpack by the door. They already did. Tom slid out from under the truck, wiped his hands on a rag, and studied her. Sierra had her mother's sharp eyes and her father's quiet edges. It was a dangerous mix in a town like Bearden. "You okay?" he asked. She shrugged. "They think I cheated." Tom nodded like he'd expected that. "Did you?" Sierra's mouth twitched. "Of course not." "Then let him talk." He tossed her a pair of gloves. "I've got a carburetor that needs a whisperer. Think you're up for it?" She caught the gloves mid-air, smiling just a little. "Depends. Is it as stubborn as last night's engine?" "Worse. It's from a '72 Bronco. They worked in silence for a while, the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled. Tom had always said that real trust shows up in the spaces between the noise. Sierra loved those moments more than she'd ever admit. After an hour of tinkering, Sierra sat back on a milk crate and wiped sweat from her forehead. "Did you know that engine was rigged?" she asked quietly. Tom didn't look up. "Figured as much. You didn't say anything. You needed to find out for yourself." Sierra studied him. Why would Callister do that? Why fake a problem Tom finally looked over? Because it was never about the engine. It was about who got to look smart trying to fix it. She absorbed that, then sighed. That's stupid. Most things worth doing are. He handed her a cold soda from the fridge. You showed him something yesterday. That's the problem. What problem they don't like being shown up, especially not by a 14-year-old girl in hand-me-down boots. Sierra rolled the can between her palms. So what? Now, Tom hesitated, then reached behind the counter. He pulled out a small, dented toolbox, its metal corners scarred from years of travel. She recognized it immediately, her mother's. You're ready, he said, simply pushing it toward her. Her breath caught. It still smelled faintly of lavender and burnt solder. Tom's voice softened. She wanted you to have it when you stopped fixing things and started listening to them. Sierra opened the lid. Inside, everything was exactly where it had always been, meticulously organized, lovingly cared for. Tools wrapped in fabric, tiny notes in her mother's handwriting tucked inside the lid. She ran her finger across one, "Don't just fix. Understand." It was more than a gift. It was a passing of the torch. She swallowed hard. Thanks, Dad. Tom cleared his throat and reached for his wrench like nothing had happened. Back to work, kiddo. But Sierra didn't move right away. She just sat there for a moment, the toolbox in her lap feeling like something inside her had quietly clicked into place. That evening, as the town busied itself with gossip and theories, a black car pulled into the edge of Bearden. It bore no plates, only a corporate decal barely visible on the rear window. Inside, a woman in a dark suit tapped on a tablet, pausing on a still image captured from the fair. Sierra Maddox, standing next to the humming engine. No expression, no celebration, just the girl, and the machine she made sing. The woman smiled, then sent a message, "She's the one." The rain came softly that Sunday morning, tapping against the tin roof of Maddox Auto like a lullaby. It was the kind of rain that didn't flood roads or soak clothes, just softened the world a little, like nature's way of reminding people to slow down. Sierra arrived before sunrise, her mother's toolbox hugged to her chest, protected under her jacket. Inside, the garage smelled like oil and rust and memory. She stepped carefully around the cluttered space, past the '72 Bronco they'd worked on the day before, past the old pegboard of wrenches Tom arranged in perfect rows, past the dusty photo of her mom soldering a circuit board with a smile too wide for her face. The lights were off, but Sierra didn't need them. She knew this place like her own mind, quiet, a little chaotic, but full of hidden sparks. She placed the toolbox gently on the workbench and opened the lid. There they were, each tool exactly where it should be. Her mother's handwriting still clear, despite the years, reminded her, torque is about trust. If you force it, you break it. Sierra smiled. Tom wasn't up yet. He liked to sleep in on Sundays, and after the week they'd had, she figured he'd earned it. So she started without him. She slid on her gloves and went to work on the stubborn alternator that had been giving them grief all week. Not with force, but with patience like her mother taught her. The rhythm came naturally. Unbolt, inspect, breathe, adjust, test. She didn't hum like Tom did, but she did something else. She listened, not just to the machine, but to the quiet hum beneath it, the mechanical whisper that told her when something was off. Half an hour passed before she heard footsteps. Tom leaned in the doorway, coffee in hand. His flannel shirt, wrinkled hair still tousled from sleep. You fixing that thing before church? Sierra didn't look up. Trying to. It's being dramatic. Tom chuckled. That truck's older than you. It's allowed a little attitude. He watched her work for a while without speaking. Then he stepped forward and set his mug down. You ever hear how your mom got her first job? Sierra shook her head. She was 17, applied to an engineering internship up in Little Rock. They told her she didn't qualify, said she didn't have a degree, didn't have the right background. What did she do? She mailed them a motor. Sierra blinked. A motor, built it from scrap, packed it in a box, shipped it with a note. If it turns on, hire me. If it doesn't, tell me what I did wrong. Sierra grinned. What happened? Tom took a sip of coffee. They hired her. She taught half the office how to solder by the end of the summer. They stood in silence, the rain tapping steadily on the roof. You remind me of her, Tom said quietly. Not just the way you work, the way you see things, the way you listen. Sierra looked down at her hands. Sometimes I wish I'd known her more. I was too little to remember much. Tom nodded. She's still here, in this place, in you. The door creaked open, and a gust of cool morning air swept through. Standing there, half soaked from the rain, was Ms. Charlotte Hayward, the high school's music teacher. Mid-40s, elegant in a down-to-earth way, she wore a long coat and carried a violin case like a lifeline. Sorry to drop in, she said. I heard Sierra was here. Tom looked surprised. Everything okay? Charlotte smiled gently. More than okay. I brought something. She walked over to the workbench, opened her case, not to reveal a violin, but a stack of papers. It's sheet music, she said to Sierra. A composition your mother was working on before she passed. She used to come to my classroom after hours, said music and machines weren't so different. Sierra's breath hitched. She reached for the papers with trembling fingers. At the top, written in flowing cursive, the engine of her voice. I thought it was just notes and phrases, Charlotte said. But after what you did at the fair, I read it again. It's more than music. It's instructions. Tom stepped closer. What kind of instructions? Charlotte looked between them. I think your wife was designing something experimental. Sound-based diagnostics, a way for machines to speak not just through sensors or code, but harmonics. She believed that if you listened closely enough, every machine had a melody. Sierra stared at the pages. Notes danced across the staff, paired with annotations like resonance pulse, thermal pitch, gear, shift, vibrato. It was brilliant. It was her. She felt a lump rising in her throat. Charlotte gently touched her shoulder. I've seen a lot of students come and go, but I've never seen anyone here the way you do. Tom said nothing, but his eyes were wet. The rain continued outside, soft, steady. Sierra held the sheet music like it might vanish. She whispered, I think she left this for me. No doubt, Charlotte said. And in that quiet garage, surrounded by tools and ghosts, and the soft hum of rain, Sierra knew something had changed. She wasn't just her father's daughter. She was her mother's voice, reborn. And the world was finally beginning to listen. By Monday morning, the buzz had reached every corner of Bearden. In coffee shops, feed stores, and the high school parking lot, people whispered about the Maddox girl. The girl who made a machine run when Callister's top engineers couldn't. The girl who didn't smile, didn't gloat, and then vanished before anyone could ask how. Some called it luck. Others muttered the word trick. A few quieter still called it brilliance. Sierra walked the school halls with her shoulders tight and her hoodie up. It was one thing to be invisible. It was another to be watched. Some classmates avoided her. Others stared too long. She felt like a rumor given legs. In chemistry, no one spoke to her. At lunch, she sat alone until Miss Charlotte Hayward appeared at her table with 2 cartons of chocolate milk. You always this popular? Charlotte asked, sliding one across. Sierra smiled faintly. Only since I made something explode. Charlotte sipped her milk and watched the crowded cafeteria. Bearden doesn't like change. It forgives slowly and forgets even slower. Sierra glanced sideways. I didn't mean to start anything. I know. But you did. They sat in companionable silence until the bell rang. Before leaving, Charlotte placed a folded envelope in front of her. "Meet me at the music room after school, and bring that notebook of your mom's." The music room smelled like varnish and dust and something soft like memory. Sunlight poured in through the tall windows, painting the hardwood floor with warm gold. On the piano, a fresh sheet of staff paper waited. Sierra hesitated at the door. She hadn't stepped into this room since 3rd grade, when she'd plunked out Twinkle Twinkle with 2 fingers and a sweaty forehead. Charlotte looked up from the piano bench. "Come in. This room doesn't bite." Sierra walked in, pulled her mother's notebook from her backpack, and laid it gently on the piano. Charlotte opened it slowly, reverently. "These notations, they're a blend of sound theory and mechanical feedback analysis. It's remarkable. I don't understand all of it yet." "You will." Charlotte reached for a tuning fork, struck it against her palm, and held it near a small humming amplifier. A low harmonic resonated in the room. "Your mother believed that machines had their own frequencies," she said. "That every malfunction, every misalignment gave off a distinct tone. If we learned how to listen properly, we could hear a machine's pain like a doctor hears a cough." Sierra leaned in. "So this isn't just music." "No, it's diagnostics through harmony, a whole new language." She played a soft chord on the piano, then adjusted a small module hooked up to an old cassette deck on the table. The motor inside stuttered, whined, then settled into a low hum that matched her chord. Sierra stared. "You're syncing it." "Exactly. Just like a tuning fork resonates with the right pitch, so does a machine." They worked for hours matching tones, studying feedback, translating her mother's margin notes. And as the sun dipped low, Sierra found herself smiling, not with pride, but with wonder. At 5 o'clock, the door opened. Tom stepped in, wiping his hands on a cloth. He paused at the sight, his daughter at the piano, a mechanical module in front of her music sheet scattered like blueprints. "Hope I'm not interrupting," he said. Charlotte smiled. "You're just in time." Sierra stood. "Dad, I think Mom left more than tools. I think she left a system. A way to read machines through sound, like she wanted us to finish it." Tom didn't speak for a moment. Then he stepped forward and placed his palm on the notebook. "She always said, machines talk." Looks like she meant it. That night, Sierra couldn't sleep. She lay awake in her room above the garage, listening to the rain tap lightly on the windows. Her mind buzzed with frequencies, waveforms, ideas that refused to be quiet. She climbed out of bed, pulled on her hoodie, and crept down into the garage. The space was dark but familiar. She set her mother's notebook on the workbench and powered on the old diagnostic radio they never used. It whined to life, static hissing into the room. She turned the dial slowly. Nothing. Crackle. Then a soft hum. She adjusted the gain. The frequency sharpened. It was low, steady warm, like a breath. She reached for a tuning fork and struck it gently. The radio pulsed in response. Her heart pounded. She struck a second fork, higher pitch. The radio vibrated. Sierra stared. She wasn't just hearing the machine. It was answering. And for the first time, she felt something rise in her chest. Not fear, not even awe, something closer to calling. A melody only she could finish. Outside, the town slept. But in a garage tucked behind a forgotten train depot, the daughter of a mechanic sat in the dark, listening to a machine sing. And in that quiet, her voice began to take shape. Tuesday brought a new kind of attention. Sierra had barely stepped through the school's front doors when she saw it, 2 men in dark suits, standing beside Principal Delaney's office, one flipping through a folder, the other scanning the hallway with clinical detachment. Their presence didn't match the chipped tile floors or the smell of overcooked tater tots wafting from the cafeteria. She passed them quickly, head down, but one of the men glanced at her. Just once. No smile, no curiosity, just quiet confirmation like he'd found what he came for. Her stomach turned. In first period, the whispers began again. This time, they weren't about the fare. They were about her. Someone had said Sierra hacked a military drone. Someone else claimed she'd been offered a scholarship to MIT. One rumor even said she was being recruited by NASA. She wished it were all just talk. But when her name was called over the intercom just after lunch, the knot in her chest tightened. Principal Delaney greeted her with an awkward smile and gestured toward the office. "They just want to talk," he said. "That's all?" Inside, the two men waited. One stood near the window, arms folded. The other sat casually in Delaney's chair, a laptop open in front of him. "Sierra Maddox," said the seated man. "My name is Agent Kerrigan. This is Agent Dorsey. We're with the National Transportation Safety Bureau." She said nothing. We saw the footage, he continued. "The way you diagnosed that engine, the modifications you made, and what you uncovered." "I fixed it," she said softly. He leaned forward. "You did more than that. You found something we've been looking for. That module," he tapped the screen, "wasn't just malfunctioning. It was designed to fail. Purposely mislead diagnostics. A deliberate layered deception." Sierra blinked. Why would anyone build that to hide system vulnerabilities? Mask real-world dangers. That engine wasn't part of a contest. It was a prototype from Callister's autonomous vehicle line. "What you exposed, it saved us months." She felt the weight of his words like a lead blanket. "We're not here to arrest anyone," Kerrigan added, reading her face. "We're here because we think you have something unique, something we need." Agent Dorsey stepped forward and placed a thin folder on the table. "We want to offer you a summer placement in D.C. with our Vehicle Safety and Analysis Division. You'd be working alongside engineers, coders, and investigators." Sierra stared at the folder, then at them. "I'm 14. You're already doing work they can't." "I didn't ask for this, no," Kerrigan said. "But sometimes the world comes knocking anyway." He slid the folder closer. "Think about it. We'll reach out again." They left without another word. Sierra sat there long after they were gone, the folder untouched. That evening, she sat on the porch steps of the garage, legs pulled to her chest, notebook balanced on her knees. Tom worked quietly beside her, sanding a door from an old F-150, not saying much. "You knew," she finally said. "Didn't you?" He didn't look up. Knew that the engine was more than a stunt, that someone was testing something. "I had a feeling." "Why didn't you stop me?" Tom put the sanding block down and wiped his hands. "Because you're not a little girl anymore. Because I knew you'd find the truth. And because you needed to see what it felt like when the world tries to twist something honest into something else." Sierra looked down at the folder she'd brought home. "They want me in Washington." Tom was quiet. They said Mom built systems that scared people, that maybe she was working on something bigger, something she never got to finish. Now Tom did look at her eyes steady. She was, but she never did it to impress anyone or to get rich. She did it because she believed machines could help people not just transport them or lift things or build stuff, but heal something. Bridge something between feeling and function. Sierra traced her fingers along the spine of the notebook. "They said what I found could change the way we build everything." Tom nodded slowly. "Then the question is, do you want to change the world? Or do you want to understand it first?" Sierra looked at him. "Can I do both?" He smiled. Maybe that's the point. Later that night, when the lights were off and the garage quieted, Sierra powered up her tuner system again. She connected the same module from the fair, routed it through the analog diagnostic board, and played a single sustained tone from her tuning fork. The machine pulsed, but this time she fed a counter-frequency through the piano pedal hooked to a feedback loop. The board blinked, stuttered, and then a stream of clean data scrolled across the display. The false readings vanished. She'd neutralized the deception. For the first time, the engine's real voice rang out clear, steady, and true. Sierra sat back in the chair, the weight of it all pressing gently on her chest. It wasn't just about fixing machines. It was about helping the world hear again. And somewhere deep inside her, beneath the ache of grief, the tension of expectations, and the mystery of legacy was a rising song. One only she could finish. By Wednesday, the dust should have settled. But in Bearden, things didn't just settle. They lingered like sawdust in a sunbeam, like an engine's hum, long after the key turned. Sierra hadn't opened the NTSB folder again. It sat on the kitchen table quietly, threatening her every time she walked by. Even when she wasn't looking at it, she felt it there, like a decision waiting to happen. Tom never mentioned it. He hadn't brought it up at dinner, hadn't asked what she planned to do. He just passed her the mashed potatoes, poured her orange juice like always, and let the silence stretch. But it wasn't the kind of silence that pressured. It was the kind that trusted. That afternoon, as school let out, and the smell of chalk dust and wet asphalt clung to the air, Sierra found herself lingering in the hallway near the staff offices. She wasn't sure why, until she saw Mr. Callister himself stride through the main doors. He looked out of place in Bearden High like a businessman, time warped into a school play. Polished shoes, sharp charcoal suit hair that gleamed like chrome. He was flanked by two assistants with clipboards and expressions as flat as steel. He wasn't here for her, she was sure of it. Until he saw her. He smiled. Tight, practiced, a politician's smile. "Ms. Maddox," he said, "I was hoping we'd run into each other." She blinked. Why, he gestured to his assistant who handed over a manila envelope. A proposal. Internship, mentorship, sponsorship, whatever word feels best. "My company would be proud to develop your talents. You have a mind we'd be lucky to harness." "Harness," she echoed. He laughed politely as if she were joking. "We could offer you resources, structure, direction, the kind of guidance that builds futures." Sierra held the envelope but didn't open it. "Was that engine at the fair part of your autonomous vehicle line?" Callister's smile dimmed just slightly. It was a prototype, yes. And the module, the one sending false signals. A test of situational judgment. We embed complexities to challenge young minds. That's not what the NTSB said. The air sharpened. "I'd be careful about who you repeat things to, Ms. Maddox," he said. Voice still smooth but thinner now like stretched wire. "There's a difference between brilliance and recklessness." Sierra didn't flinch. "You should know. You built it." He stared at her a moment longer, then offered another clipped smile. "Keep the proposal. You might change your mind." And with that, he turned, coat sweeping behind him like a curtain closing. Back at the garage, Tom was under the hood of a Civic with a cracked manifold. Sierra didn't speak at first, just stood beside him, watching the steady rhythm of his hands. "I saw Callister," she finally said. "I know. You knew he'd show up. I figured once the government came calling, the corporations wouldn't be far behind." Sierra held out the envelope. Tom didn't take it. "He's offering me a future," she said. "Money. Recognition. Maybe even college early." He wiped grease off his fingers and leaned against the workbench, finally looking her in the eye. "You want all that? I don't know. Then don't answer yet." She frowned. "It feels like everyone's waiting for me to pick a side. NTSB, Callister, school, the garage. Like I have to know already." Tom's voice was gentle. "You don't. I keep thinking. Maybe Mom would know what to do." Tom was quiet a long time. Then he reached into his back pocket and pulled out something small, a photograph, worn around the edges, folded down the middle. He handed it to her. It was a picture of her mother years ago, standing in the garage beside a broken-down Harley. Her hands were covered in soot, her hair tied in a bandana, and her smile wild, proud, free. "Your mom turned down 2 job offers from private labs," Tom said. "One of them offered double what we made in a year. But she said no. Why, she said, if I start building for them, I stop building for people." Sierra swallowed hard. She believed in small things done with heart. That's how she measured worth. Not by whose name was on the building, but by what it stood for. Sierra nodded slowly. Then carefully she folded the envelope Callister gave her and dropped it into the recycling bin. "I don't want to build for someone else's name." Tom smiled. "Then let's build for yours." That evening, they worked side by side on the new interface. Sierra's design, her mother's harmonic patterns, Tom's steady hands grounding the process. They'd taken the core of the false module and turned it into something new, a device that read vibrations and translated them into audio frequencies in real time. Call it what Tom asked, setting the final screw. Sierra thought for a moment, then scribbled across the label, Vox 1. The first voice. "Not bad," Tom said, but Sierra didn't answer. She was already reaching for the tuner, already playing the first note, and the machine answered not in error messages or static pulses, but in song. A low resonant tone that felt alive. She closed her eyes. She didn't need applause. She had purpose. She had legacy. She had her father beside her. And in the still hum of a Bearden evening, the girl who once fixed an impossible engine now listened to the future whisper her name. It was the kind of morning that smelled like cut grass and engine oil, the kind that made Bearden feel like it hadn't changed in 40 years. But Sierra Maddox had changed, and she was about to do something that would change everything again. She stood near the front of the auditorium at Bearden High, holding a small cardboard box with both hands. Inside were 7 printed copies of the Vox 1 prototype, each neatly assembled with hand-labeled cables, harmonics charts, and instructions she'd written in pencil the night before. Her fingers still had smudges of graphite on them. The annual Future Innovators Award ceremony was about to begin. She hadn't planned to attend, but Charlotte Hayward had said something that stuck with her. "You've already changed the conversation. Now choose how you want to finish the sentence." Sierra wasn't here for the award. She was here for the boy who never got the chance. At the center of the auditorium sat Caleb Burnside, a quiet sophomore who spent more time in the library's robotics lab than talking to other students. He'd entered the Youth Mechanics Challenge, too. His engine hadn't even turned over. One faulty capacitor had sent him home with a red face, and his shoulders hunched so low they nearly touched his belt. He was one of the first to tell Sierra she must have cheated. And now, she was about to give him her work. Sierra climbed the short stairs to the side of the stage, just as Principal Delaney was welcoming parents and students. She found a spot beside the heavy velvet curtain and waited. They called her name halfway through the ceremony. Everyone applauded politely, some out of duty, others out of curiosity, and a few perhaps out of genuine respect. Sierra stepped up to the podium slowly, calmly, box still in hand. She didn't look out at the crowd. She looked at Caleb, and then she smiled. "Thank you," she said into the microphone, her voice soft but sure. "I wasn't expecting to speak today, and I'm not here to take a trophy." That got the room's attention. She glanced at the administrator seated behind her. "I've learned a lot in the past week, about engines, about sound, about how machines communicate. But mostly, her eyes flicked toward the students about what we do when someone proves us wrong." The room hushed. "I didn't do what I did at the fair to impress anyone," she continued. "I did it because I was taught by 2 of the quietest people I've ever known that you don't fix machines by shouting at them. You fix them by listening." She opened the box. "I built this based on my mom's research. It's called Vox 1. It lets you hear machines the way I do, not through diagnostics, but through resonance and tone, through music. She stepped down from the podium, walked through the aisle, and gently placed one of the units on Caleb's lap. I think you'll make it better than I ever could. Caleb stared at her, stunned. And I'm giving one to the robotics club, and the auto shop, and anyone else who wants to understand machines, not just fix them. She returned to the stage. I'm not here to compete anymore. I'm here to collaborate. And with that, she handed the box to Principal Delaney and left the stage to the sound of silence so deep it rang. A silence made not of confusion, but respect. Outside, the wind stirred the flagpole ropes and scattered the first signs of early spring dogwood blossoms and tiny leaves. Tom stood waiting by the truck, one arm resting on the door, the other holding a paper coffee cup. You meant to drop Jaws in there, he asked. I didn't want to win. I wanted to make space. Tom looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. You just did. They drove home in quiet, the windows down, and the road ahead washed in late morning sunlight. When they pulled into the driveway, Sierra noticed someone sitting on the porch bench. Charlotte. She was holding another envelope, but this one wasn't government issue. This came through the district office, she said, standing. It's from the State Board of Education. Sierra opened it carefully. Her breath caught. It was an invitation to co-present at the Arkansas STEM conference that summer, not as a student, as a guest speaker. Tom whistled low. That's a first. Sierra didn't speak right away. She read the letter twice, then folded it back into the envelope. I'm not ready, she said. Charlotte tilted her head. That's why they invited you, because you don't think you are. Tom leaned against the truck, arms crossed. You don't have to say yes. But if you do make it your story, not theirs. Sierra looked at them both, and slowly she nodded. That night, she returned to the garage alone. The Vox 1 prototype sat on the bench, humming faintly under low voltage. She placed her tuning fork on the table, struck it, and listened. The hum shifted, then settled. She adjusted the feedback gain and smiled. The tone that came back was smooth, open, full. And she realized something. Then she hadn't just built a device. She'd built a language. And maybe, just maybe, she was ready to teach it. The phone rang just past 7 a.m., breaking the quiet of a golden Saturday morning. Tom answered it with a groggy grunt, still tying his boots in the kitchen. Sierra, seated at the counter with a bowl of cereal, slowly turning soggy, looked up as he froze mid-sentence. Yes, Tom said. She's here. A pause. Then he extended the phone. It's for you. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, unsure who'd call the garage this early on a weekend. She pressed the receiver to her ear. Is this Sierra Maddox? A woman asked. Yes. This is Dr. Evelyn Rusk, director of the Department of Applied Acoustics at Fayetteville Tech. I attended your demonstration yesterday at Bearden High. Sierra stood straighter. Oh, hello. I saw the Vox 1 prototype, and I saw how you gave it away. Sierra held her breath. There's a power in people who don't cling to ownership, Dr. Rusk continued. It tells me you're not trying to be right. You're trying to be useful. Sierra blinked. I just wanted people to understand machines the way I do. I think you can do more than that, Dr. Rusk said. We're launching a research initiative, music and mechanical response systems. We're calling it harmonic engineering. I'd like you to join. Sierra's cereal was definitely ruined now. Join, as in collaborate. Summer residency. Weekends during the spring. You'll have access to labs mentorship and, more importantly, people who want to listen. The line was quiet for a long second. Then Sierra said softly, Yes, I'd like that. By Monday, word had spread again. But this time, something was different. Instead of avoidance or stares, Sierra was met with nods. Quiet respect. Caleb stopped her by the lockers to show her a modified version of her module already adapted for wheelchair diagnostics. The robotics club had posted a thank you note with a photo of them holding their Vox 1 units, thumbs up and beaming. But it wasn't until Charlotte Hayward stepped up to the microphone at the school board meeting that Sierra realized how far things had come. "I have taught for 18 years, Charlotte said, standing straight and sure in a navy blouse and simple heels. I've seen students ace every test and forget every lesson. I've seen others flounder on paper and change the world with how they see it. Sierra Maddox listens in a way that makes things speak back. That is not something we can grade. That is something we must nurture." A hush fell over the boardroom. Charlotte looked directly at Superintendent Granger. "I request funding to expand our audio engineering lab, and I request that Sierra Maddox be named its first student mentor." Sierra felt her breath catch. The vote passed unanimously. That night, Charlotte joined Tom and Sierra for dinner at the kitchen table, barbecued chicken roasted corn, and Charlotte's homemade blueberry pie. They talked about machines and music, about education and expectation. But it was when the plates were cleared and the coffee poured that Charlotte's voice dropped to a different register. "I used to think my job was to teach music," she said. "Scales, technique, discipline. But the older I get, the more I realize it's about teaching people how to hear what's not being said." Tom nodded slowly. "Hardest part of any machine isn't what's broken. It's what no one thinks to ask." Charlotte smiled at him, warm and a little wistful. "I've seen the way you raised her, the way you didn't get in the way of her becoming herself." "I tried not to," Tom said, his voice low. "You didn't just try. You listened." Silence lingered soft and thick, like the evening light pouring through the kitchen window. Sierra glanced between them, then stood slowly. "I'm going to take the rest of the pie down to the garage," she said, lifting the plate. They both looked up. She smiled gently. "You two probably have things to talk about." Tom raised an eyebrow, but Charlotte laughed. And just like that, the air shifted. In the garage, Sierra set the pie down, pulled on her gloves, and powered on the latest version of the Vox 1 unit. She tuned it not to an engine this time, but to a fan motor they'd pulled from a junked HVAC system. The hum was fractured, uneven. She adjusted the frequencies, not to fix, but to listen deeper. And then she heard it, not just the pitch, but the rhythm, a pulsing, almost breathing sound. She closed her eyes. Suddenly, she wasn't in a garage anymore. She was inside a music hall made of pistons and wires, where resonance was conversation and sound was soul. For a moment, everything else disappeared, and when she opened her eyes again, she wrote a single line in her notebook. "Maybe machines don't just talk. Maybe they remember." Back inside, Tom poured Charlotte another cup of coffee. "You think she's ready for all this?" he asked quietly. Charlotte didn't answer right away. She watched Sierra through the window, her outline visible in the glow of workbench light, hands precise, brow furrowed in calm focus. Then she said, "I don't think she was ever waiting to be ready. I think the world is finally ready for her." Tom looked down at his cup. Then, without smiling, he said, "She gets that from her mom." Charlotte reached over, gently touched his hand. "She gets it from you, too." Spring came early to Bearden that year. By late March, the magnolias bloomed too fast, bees hovered with lazy purpose, and the sun hung longer in the sky, like it had nowhere else to be. But for the first time in years, the town didn't seem stuck in time. It felt like it was paying attention, because Sierra Maddox had quietly taught it how. It began with the sound of music from the garage, not a radio, not a playlist, but music laced with intention, half mechanical, half human. Tom had wired the new Vox 1 units into a few of their shop's most temperamental engines. With Sierra's guidance, each repair began not with a wrench, but with listening. And the strange thing, it worked. People noticed. Soon, a boy from the high school auto shop stopped by for a demo, then another. By the end of the week, they were coming in small groups, not just for repairs, but for curiosity, for understanding, for the calm that came from hearing a machine breathe right. Sierra began hosting weekly listen labs in the back of the garage. She called them quiet hours, a time to sit with machines, instruments, questions. Charlotte lent the music room speakers. Caleb built a portable signal visualizer. Tom cleared his workbench and quietly stepped back, watching his daughter fill the space like she'd always belonged there. And then someone made a call to the local paper. The headline ran on the Sunday edition, "The Girl Who Heard Machines. Bearden's Young Inventor Teaches Town to Listen." It should have embarrassed her. It didn't, because it wasn't about her anymore. That same week, Principal Delaney invited Sierra to speak at the Spring Assembly, an annual event that usually honored the baseball team and the chess club. But this year, they gave her the final slot. Sierra stood in front of the entire student body, hands tucked into her hoodie notebook at her side. She didn't use slides. She didn't need a mic. "I used to think I didn't have a voice," she began. "That I was just someone who fixed things other people broke." She looked out at the rows of students, some attentive, some still skeptical. But then I realized, fixing isn't a sign of brokenness. It's a form of care. Listening isn't passive, it's creative. Every machine, every person has a pattern, a rhythm. If you pay attention long enough, you learn their story. A pause. She flipped open her notebook. "My mom taught me that through sound. My dad taught me that through silence. And now I want to teach it through both." She pulled a small module from her backpack and placed it on the podium. A quiet buzz filled the gymnasium. Sierra held up a tuning fork, struck it gently. The module responded first with a soft tone, then a chorus of layered harmonics. A warm, resonant sound that filled the air like sunrise. Somewhere in the back, a girl clutched her chest. In the front row, Caleb closed his eyes. And when the tone faded, no one spoke. Because the silence after was its own kind of music. Later that evening, Tom and Charlotte set up folding chairs in the garage. The town had asked if Sierra would consider hosting a community evening, a demonstration, a concert, a something. She had agreed only if they called it a gathering. No press, no sponsors, no expectations, just people. Listening. By 6 o'clock, the place was full. Old men from the barber shop, teachers, students, moms in work uniforms, farmers in denim. Charlotte brought her violin. Caleb brought the new frequency scanner. Someone brought pie. Sierra didn't open with a speech. She simply stood in the center of the space, lit by strings of garage bulbs, and played a recording through the Vox 1, the sound of an old lawnmower engine syncing perfectly with the C major scale. The audience chuckled, then leaned in. Then came the sound of a vintage sewing machine, harmonizing with a cello loop. Then the soft stutter of a pickup truck starter, layered into a 4-beat rhythm. Finally, Sierra stepped forward and played a piece she'd written herself built, from the melody her mother had started in that forgotten composition. She called it the engine of her voice. It wasn't grand. It wasn't flashy. But it held something true. When she finished, the garage was utterly still. Then came a single clap. Then another, and then the kind of applause that comes not from being impressed, but from being moved. Tom stood in the back, his arms folded, a softness in his eyes that hadn't been there for years. Beside him, Charlotte wiped a tear from her cheek and smiled. After the crowd drifted home and the tools were put away, Sierra stepped out into the cool night air and looked up at the stars. "You think Mom would have come tonight?" she asked softly. Tom walked up beside her. She never missed a concert. They stood in silence. Then Sierra said, "It's weird. I don't feel like I'm following in her footsteps anymore." Tom turned to her. "Why's that?" "Because I think I've started making my own." The day began with a phone call not from the school or the NTSB or Fayetteville Tech. This time, it was from the nursing home on the east side of Bearden. A soft-spoken nurse named Trina explained that one of the residents, Mr. Lowell Granger, had read about Sierra's invention in the local paper. He was a retired diesel mechanic, 91 years old, nearly deaf, and mostly withdrawn. But something in that article had stirred him. He asked if she could visit. Trina said he'd like to hear again, not people, but machines. Said he misses the way they used to talk to him. Sierra didn't hesitate. That afternoon, she and Tom loaded up one of the smaller Vox 1 units, a few sensors, and a portable audio tuner into the truck. They drove in silence, sunlight flickering through the trees along County Road 8, the warmth of spring settling like a hush over the world. When they arrived, the nurse led them down a quiet hallway to a small room filled with sunlight and the faint scent of wood polish. Mr. Granger was sitting by the window in a faded flannel shirt and a pair of old mechanic's boots, polished nearly smooth from decades of wear. His hands trembled slightly, but his eyes, cloudy with age, lit up the moment he saw the device in Sierra's arms. "You brought it," he said. Voice. Raspy but clear. Sierra nodded and pulled up a chair beside him. "I did." He gestured toward a rusted model engine on the table beside him. "Built that in '62, retired it in '98, but I still know every sound it made." He tapped his chest. "I feel them in here, you know." Sierra set up the Vox 1 module beside the engine and attached a small harmonic sensor. She struck a tuning fork, adjusted the feedback, and played back the low-frequency resonance of the worn flywheel. The old man closed his eyes and smiled. "That's her," he whispered. "That's what she used to sound like when she was purring smooth. I ain't heard that in 30 years. Tom stood at the doorway, arms crossed, watching, listening. Sierra adjusted the pitch slightly, layering it with a faint rhythm from the combustion pulse. "It's not just memory," she said softly. "It's still in the engine. The frequencies don't disappear. They just fade beneath the noise." Mr. Granger opened his eyes. "You gave her back to me." Sierra didn't know what to say, but maybe she didn't need to, because in that moment, the hum between the machine and the man filled the room with something deeper than conversation. Something like healing. Word of the visit spread quickly. By the end of the week, Sierra had received requests from 2 schools, a veterans center, and a tech startup in Little Rock. Each one wanted her to bring Vox 1 not just to fix, but to listen, to restore. It wasn't about engines anymore. It was about echoes. About bringing back voices that had gone quiet not because they were broken, but because no one had cared to listen. One Thursday evening, Sierra found herself back in Charlotte's music room. The old upright piano sat open, the Vox 1's newest sensor, mounted just beneath the soundboard. Charlotte ran her bow gently across the strings of her violin, while Sierra adjusted the tuning monitor. "What do you hear?" Charlotte asked. Sierra listened, then smiled. "It's not just the notes. It's the way the wood responds, the way the string pulls the frame and the frame pushes back." Charlotte stopped playing. "It's a conversation." Exactly. They spent the next hour capturing waveforms, mapping vibrational feedback, layering tones, until the entire music room seemed to shimmer. At one point, Charlotte said almost to herself, "Your mother would have loved this." Sierra nodded but didn't answer. She didn't need to, because everything they were building was already her answer. That night, as Sierra and Tom sat on the tailgate of the truck outside the garage, watching fireflies blink over the grass, he finally broke the quiet. "You ever wonder if it's too much?" Sierra looked over. "What is the attention, the requests, the future people want to hand you before you've even had time to live the present?" She leaned back on her elbows. "Yeah, sometimes." Tom took a breath. "You don't have to say yes to all of it." "I know. Some of the best things your mom ever did never made a headline." Sierra looked up at the stars. "Some of the best things you ever did didn't either." He chuckled low in his throat. "Touché." A breeze passed through the trees. The kind of breeze that carries stories, the kind you can't quite hear, but still understand. "I don't want to be famous," Sierra said. Tom nodded. "Good. I just want to make things more honest, more human. Machines, people, all of it." Tom looked at her with quiet pride. "You already are." Inside the garage, the Vox 1 prototype sat on the bench, now wired into a recording system and small amplifier. Next to it was Sierra's notebook, open to a clean page. She'd written only one sentence across the top. "Machines don't need us to talk louder. They need us to listen better." She closed the cover and smiled. The invitation arrived on thick paper, with embossed gold lettering tucked inside a midnight blue envelope. It bore the emblem of the National Symposium on Emerging Technologies, the largest of its kind in the country, and beneath it a simple line, "Keynote speaker, Sierra Maddox, age 14. The engine of her voice, rethinking harmony and human-machine communication. Tom held the envelope like it might crumble. Sierra just stared. "You don't have to go," he said. "I know. You've already said more than enough." Sierra smiled faintly. "Maybe this time I want to be heard." The conference hall in Chicago was unlike anything she'd ever seen. Glass walls, floating staircases, lights that shimmered like city stars. People in suits and heels bustled past, with badges swinging from their necks and lattes clenched in one hand. It didn't feel like a place for someone in Converse and a denim jacket lined with grease-smudged notes. But she wasn't here to fit in. She was here to amplify what had always been quiet. Charlotte came too, insisting she be there to tune the piano Sierra would use. Tom came because, in his words, somebody's got to make sure the adults don't mess things up. The auditorium seated over 600. Engineers, professors, investors, students. They didn't laugh when she stepped up to the podium. They didn't whisper when she pulled a tuning fork from her back pocket. They just waited. Sierra placed the Vox 1 unit on a small table beside her. Then she breathed in and began. "I'm not here to tell you how to fix machines. I'm here to ask why we stopped listening to them. My name is Sierra Maddox. I grew up in a garage behind a train yard in Arkansas. My mom was an engineer. My dad is a mechanic. They both taught me that machines don't just run, they respond. They get tired, they adapt. They break in ways that diagnostics can't always define. And if you learn to listen, not just with your ears, but with attention, you begin to realize machines are reflections of us. They mirror our rhythms, our faults, our silence." She turned on the Vox 1 module. A hum filled the auditorium, not harsh, not mechanical, almost human. She struck her tuning fork. The device answered. She struck another. A higher harmony responded. Sierra looked up at the crowd. "This is what my mother left me, a language, a way of hearing what's been ignored. And this is what I'm leaving with you. Innovation without empathy is just noise. Listening is the first step to healing machines, people, everything." She stopped. There was no thunderous applause. Not yet. Just stillness. Like the entire room had leaned in and was afraid to exhale. Then it began. A single clap. Then another. Then the whole room stood, not for her age, not for novelty, but for truth. After the talk, Tom found her backstage, arms crossed, trying hard not to look as proud as he felt. "You shook the walls," he said. "I didn't want to shake them," she replied, adjusting the Vox 1 unit. "I just wanted them to feel something move." Charlotte hugged her. "You did." Back in Bearden, spring melted into summer. Requests kept coming, universities, companies, documentaries. Sierra answered only a few. She spent most of her days in the garage with Tom, or in the music room with Charlotte, or leading quiet hours for younger kids who wanted to learn not how to fix machines, but how to understand them. She called it the Listen Lab. No grades, no pressure, just patience. Sometimes they worked on lawnmower engines, sometimes a keyboard, once even a wind-up toy. And one day, a girl named Lily, 8 years old, barely spoke, came in holding a broken tape recorder that had belonged to her grandfather. Sierra and Lily rebuilt it together, tuning it one sound at a time. When it played again, Lily whispered, "That's the sound of him." And Sierra knew she'd done something more than teach. She'd returned something lost. One evening in July, Sierra sat on the front porch as fireflies drifted across the yard. Charlotte had just left, and Tom was still inside cleaning up dinner. She opened her mother's old notebook, now full of scribbles, diagrams, and fingerprints from dozens of students. There was only one blank page left. She turned to it and wrote, "This began with a girl who heard an engine." But maybe it was never about the engine. Maybe it was about all the voices we've forgotten how to hear, the quiet ones, the patient ones, the ones that stayed even when no one was listening. This is for them. She closed the notebook and looked to the stars. And in the silence that followed, she didn't feel like a prodigy or a speaker or a student. She just felt whole. That night, Tom found her asleep on the porch swing, the notebook still clutched to her chest. He didn't wake her, just sat beside her, and listened to the quiet echo of everything she'd built, not with volume, but with attention. If this story spoke to something in you, maybe a memory, maybe a feeling you hadn't named in a long time, I'd love to know. Where in the world are you listening from? Drop a comment and share a little piece of your own story. It means more than you know. And if you'd like to hear more quiet miracles like this about love, courage, and the small things that change everything, feel free to subscribe. This space is here for hearts like yours. Thank you truly for spending your time with this story. It was written with care, and I'm grateful you were here to hear it.